Good morning and happy Valentine's Day. I'm Libby from Quantum, the official sailmaker for the Helly Hansen Sailing World Regatta Series. Welcome to St. Pete for our weather and local knowledge. We're excited to support you with coaching and sales service as well here at the event. Don't forget to join our WhatsApp and the WhatsApp for the event website from the event to get all the updates. Sign up links are on the website and I'll post those and a link to get in touch with Quantum also. With that, I'll turn it over to our favorite forecaster, Shay Gibson.
Thank you, Libby. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. Today, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat window. We'll address those as we go along in real time or just after we finish the segment. For the agenda today, we'll do introductions, forecast overview, tidal currents with breeze, applying the forecast, and then some Q&A at the very end if there are any lingering questions there. Speakers with me today are Dave Gerber, Carter Cameron, and local legend Dave Mendelblatt. We were just talking a little bit ago about some of the nuances of the area during this kind of a direction of wind, so we'll be diving into that pretty shortly here. Quick shameless plug for us at SailFlow. If you haven't tried it, that's a free download. We do have daily pro forecast at 7 p.m. and then updated at 7 a.m. from our team, from our meteorology team. How to sail in Tampa Bay. We have an east-northeast wind diving down today that did make it here. It's a little bit more on the north-northeast side right now in the directions, but we'll see how this pans out. For the race courses, A, B, C, and D, you can see here right down the middle of the shipping channel and over towards A by the marina. And we'll be talking more about that. We'll bring Dave Gerber in, Carter Cameron, Dave Mendelblatt, as far as the race courses and some of the tactics out there. Tide information for today, we have a slack at 10:28 a.m. where flood begins. We have max flood at 2:15. So that'll be on the increase, and that's generally from the south for the flood. And with that, I'll go ahead and exit the slide deck, and let's take a look at the surface map and get my draw tool over here. And earlier in the week we talked about this front maybe parking just north up over the northern Tampa Bay area. Well, it has made it south and more down towards Venice Beach at this point. So high pressure is aggregated over the Ohio Valley and is now pulling that northeast flow down the coastline. Right now, like I said, it's a little bit more on the north-northeast side, but I think in time, with the clouds breaking eventually, then we'll see that east-northeast flow. I just wanted to give you an idea of what's the driving factor behind that. We'll see this continue through today as the high pressure quickly starts moving off to the east. And that means overnight tonight, we're going to see the winds veering more east over to southeast by tomorrow morning. So, and then that cold front's going to actually lift as a warm front back across the area, and we'll talk about Saturday here shortly. But let's take a look at the visible satellite imagery. Right now, I can see some lingering clouds. Dave Gerber, we were talking earlier on the water. Yesterday there was some sea fog sitting just off the coastline, and that I'm not sure if it really worked its way inside of Egmont Channel or not. It looked like it was lingering just off the coast. But you may see a little bit of a glow over the water today. That's a humid air mass. It's going to be warming. And then eventually, like I said, tomorrow morning, lifting as a warm front. And so if you see this kind of glowing hue across the water, that means humidity is up and you have some shallow marine layering, which could have some impacts on the wind across the course of the day, making for a few ups and downs. But just knowing that visibly, if you see that, then that's what we call shallow marine layering. But it looks like right now we have a little bit of low stratus, maybe some stratocumulus clouds that are going to be breaking up, and then eventually some sunshine. So that's what we're seeing for today. Maybe an isolated shower or two could build off the city with some clouding that makes it across the bay. But I think overall we're going to be seeing partly cloudy to mostly sunny skies at some point. Right now, locally, we're seeing 13 knots of wind, and the direction is 42 degrees. So, at this point, we'll probably see the winds veering, and you can see lower in the bay across Egmont Channel, we do see a full veer over to 72 degrees. But right now at Tampa Bay Cut J, one quick thing I want you to understand about this sensor is that it's higher up at 48 feet. So we talked about that in the forecast, the preliminary in yesterday's update. So just be aware of that. So, you may want to take a knot or two off the top of this sensor, maybe a little bit more geared towards this. The Whitted Airport, it's reading the same thing. So if you see some consistency, that means it's probably going to be the same across the course. But right now we're seeing 13 knots, and I think what's going to happen today is we talked about the city, the thermal gradient, where that perturbs the winds, where we see this lift in the winds in the morning, and then by the time we get about 10, 11 o'clock, the winds back down, and that's due to the thermal gradient. And again, to show you the visual on that, if we back out, take a look at the city, So when the sun comes out, right, or even when the sun doesn't come out, the ambient air temps get higher. Well, the sea surface temperatures are about 71 degrees right now. East northeast or northeast wind is cool air that's diving down at an angle. Anytime you have a northerly element, it's basically air that is moving out from the dome of high pressure and settling down at an angle. So there's a cool element to it. And as it crosses the city, you have this thermal signature that's ongoing, and it perturbs the wind, and it does not allow it to couple very well with the surface. So what happens is, as the air temperatures rise through late morning and into the afternoon, the winds die, and then they come back up in the late afternoon hours as the air temperatures drop. So when I say die, I don't mean die all the way. I mean, they fade a pretty good bit. So even though we're showing 13 knots now, we could get up to 15, maybe 16 knots by 9 o'clock or so, and then backing down again. So if you look at the modeling, some of this high resolution model information reads this now. It's been watching over time. So we see this increase here and then coming down, and I'm going to call for about 8 to 12 knots. I'm going to split the baby right down the middle. I think it's some of the models are a little bit optimistic, like the NAM 3, and others are holding right down near the 8 to 9 knot mark. So 8 to 12 is a good call, pinning it down and then coming back up later in the day, right? So that's your general flow. And, Dave Mendelblatt, you're the local legend there, right? You know the area pretty well. I've been down to Tampa many times and ridden out in this weather, so I tend to know it as well. But you've been there quite some time. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be nice, steady breeze all day. I wouldn't expect big shifts, although I would expect there to be, big puffs and big lulls throughout the day, and I think those are going to be important, especially downwind, because I know you're getting into the current a little bit later, but the current is basically opposing the wind, so it's going to make the upwinds seem a little bit shorter and the downwinds seem a little bit longer. And I think if you're in a boat that goes a lot faster when you're in better pressure, it's going to be really important, especially downwind, to keep your head on a swivel and try to stay in the puffs and really connect the dots downwind.
Yeah, good point. And I'm showing the data right here. So normally in our sail flow or some of our enterprise applications, we have sea surface currents, but the National Weather Service rewrote the code. So now our team has to go back from scratch and rewrite the application for it. But this is the raw data. And Katie Kirk from NOAA, a colleague of mine, reached out and said, if you need any information about the currents, I'm your person. So I got this from her, which is really good. But it shows you the currents at 2 o'clock p.m. when the full flood is kicking in, right? So that's a good point with the east northeast or the northeast wind diving down across that to make for a few of those forecast challenges. So just to give you an idea, let me go to 10 o'clock a.m. You see the current being from the north or northeast, mainly, from that direction. That's your ebb. And then as we go forward in time towards slack tide, you see all the variances in the current. So mainly just be looking for that southerly push around 11 to 12 o'clock. And you can see here by 12, 1, and even 2 o'clock, you got a full flood ongoing for that point. Now, the currents, the speed of the current is likely going to be right around the 0.75 to 0.85 knot range. You could get up to a knot right down the middle of the channel. Dave Gerber, you were on the course yesterday with currents. What did you see for, do you think it got up to a knot? And we talked about, having some fun with fruit and dropping it in the water earlier, but do you think it got up to that point?
Yeah, when Carter and I were out there, we were talking about that, and we thought there was a 0.9 to a knot, and obviously yesterday it lined up very, very nicely with the wind direction, which made for beautiful flat water sailing. So I guess the quick little reminder I'd like to say is, as it's switching today, we're obviously sailing in a very shallow area. I could see the chop coming up very quickly on these beats. And yeah, just a quick reminder that we're in that full moon cycle. So I could see the water movement overperforming a little bit.
This is true. We're on a waning gibbous, but it's close enough to be full. So we're still showing as a full moon. Carter, how about you? Anything to chime in with?
Lots of agreements with Dave. And so Dave and I will be out there today, and we're going to be testing current readings from the top of the course to the bottom of the course on a different circle or two. As we change to different locations throughout the bay from from the channels to the shallower areas, I would expect to see different current readings in those areas there. So part of your pre-start homework when you get out there this morning, get out there early enough so that you can do an upwind leg and you can throw a piece of fruit in the water for yourself at a windward mark or where you think the windward mark would be, and time and see how far it moves and check out what's different at the top of the course and the bottom of the course.
Great, thank you. So just if anybody's wondering what product I'm using, it's this right here, Tides and Currents, the Tampa Bay Operation and Forecast System. And then I went over to the Integrated Ocean Observing System to find that. But TBOFS is pretty cool. I mean, it even shows you some of the bathymetry of the area where you can see the shipping channel here, some of the shallows, really, really neat mapping of the Tampa Bay area. So with that said, so we're, that's the call for today is as we get to the race start, we're looking at the wind starting to fade. So we may still have a 10 to 14 knot range and then fading down to 8 to 12. And I think, the direction is going to be a little bit tricky today too. We may see some toggling between 40 and 80 degrees. So be on the lookout for that range of wind. That's pretty wide. I mean, 40 degrees is a lot, but we have to account for the sunshine, the heating of the city to oscillate that wind back and forth a little bit. It may not be one straight direction. I mean, Egmont Channel and the Skyway Fishing Pier, those areas are a little bit farther south. And so the winds tend to, react a little bit differently. But when you have the thermal gradient coming across Gibsonton and Adamsville and Apollo Beach in those areas, the winds can be a little bit shifty in their directions. So just be aware of that for today. Be ready for big shifts on the directions, maybe not the speeds. Dave Mindelblatt, any inkling on that before we move on to the tomorrow and Sunday's forecast?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I've seen, over the last few years, I've seen some wind shifts out there that have sort of surprised me in terms of it ending up being farther left or farther right than I expected at the end of the day. So, the models are great, but you have to believe what you're seeing out there, and of course, keep your eyes out of the boat and use what you're seeing and don't just get hung up on what you think it's going to be like before you leave the dock.
Okay, thank you very much. Temperatures today are going to be in the low 80s, mid 80s tomorrow, and then 81 on Sunday. If we look at the WPC surface map once again, by overnight tonight and into tomorrow, the cold front sitting just to our south lifts north as a warm front and starts its trek. And with that, the winds will be veering from southeast over to south. Now, the tricky part about this is when they turn. So we see some high resolution models starting to sniff at this by about 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. So the HRRR tends to be a better preset model than it does a wind model, but it does pretty good in the Tampa Bay area. So we want to look at that. We also have in our model suite the TRIM. This is a newer one that we started last year and is AI driven, right? So it takes a lot of it basically kind of takes the averages and the means from a lot of different models. So it doesn't actually ingest the physics itself. It actually takes a bunch of different models and it actually runs a report off of that. So we have that plus the WRF 2 kilometer. So be looking at these high res models for tomorrow, just as a precursor for today. But it looks like, early afternoon and through mid afternoon, we could see a nice little bump in the winds. And it really matters when this shift happens, right? When we go from the southeast flow over to the south or even south-southwest flow. So more tomorrow morning. Be sure to join us tomorrow morning. We'll exact this much better. But it is looking better. The forecast is looking more optimistic than it did just yesterday and even the day before. And as we get into Sunday, of course, low level jetting really couples well. We see a nice windy day ahead for Sunday. We're looking at the 14 to 18 knot ranges, maybe even higher, 16 to 20 is not off the table as another cold front approaches the area. I think, with storms though, I think that this front is going to arrive a little bit later. The prefrontal build across this area won't make it here, I don't think, by the time the races are over. So I think we're going to be okay. I'm not concerned about severe weather at this point, but looking at the NAM3, the storm line really starts to break up as it drops south. And so it may not even make it to Tampa Bay. It may break up before even getting all the way down south there. So we'll be going through this day to day and exacting a little bit more. Let's see, any questions? I don't see any questions in the box, so any Q&A from the team here as far as tomorrow and Sunday?
Jay, I got a quick question on today. Is there going to be anything today if, you know, if they're looking to, the competitors are looking to the north, northeast, any type of cloud or anything that could give them any sign?
Well, there may be some on the western side of Tampa where you have this east northeast flow building up some of the cumulus clouds over St. Pete area, but such a thin line of coast may not see any clouding at all. Generally speaking, that when these winds happen, you may see some spotty cumulus clouds coming off the city, but that's about it. You know, there's not really so much. And Dave Mendelblatt, you know, might could answer that question a little bit better because he's there locally more than I am. But generally on a south or southwest wind is when you would see that cloud build up along the eastern
Right.
side of the city. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't doubt if you get a few cumulus clouds building in the afternoon from that city heating and that cool, dense air mixing a little bit. Yeah, Dave Mendelblatt, anything to add there before we sign off?
Yeah, usually, I mean, if the peninsula of Florida is getting real warm as the afternoon goes on, which it may do, you may see a lot of clouds building over the central part of the state. But I don't think we're gonna, you know, we're always looking at those when it's generally more sea breeze conditions, because those are an indication that we're gonna be getting a nice sea breeze starting to form. But I don't think I don't think we're looking at sea breeze conditions here. So even though I'm always looking at the sky and trying to use clouds to help predict what the wind is going to be doing, when it's this sort of pattern and this sort of wind, I don't usually try to infer too much from local clouds that I'm seeing.
I thought you made a nice point, Dave, that right, then they definitely want to have their eyes on the surface of the water, because I can see what you're saying. Going downwind, they're going to want to make sure they're in breeze with the water fighting the wind on the runs. Makes a lot of sense.
Okay, gentlemen, I think that's a wrap. Covered all the points today. And everybody have a good time out there today. Best wishes, Godspeed, and we'll see you back here tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.